as much as I can talk about. I probably talked too much already. Let's talk about AI a little bit, just briefly. Is AI art? Yes. Does that get AI off the hook? No. It's like a wolf is a dog. There's a wolf is not a dog. They're of the same creature type, but they're different. How is AI art obviously different than regular art? Well, let's talk about that. A regular artist can maybe make like an oil painting with a lot of practice and a lot of hard work, and then they get competent at it and they can crank one out. I don't know what it takes for, say Bob Ross can do a decent one in like 45 minutes. Okay, that's him. AI art, I can put in a prompt and hit go, and probably in about 45 seconds, I have something that's kind of equivalent to what Bob Ross did. Now let's take it a step further. I can do a batch job, and I can do 50 of those that vary up a little bit. Maybe some of them aren't quite as good, but close. And I can do that in about 15, 20 minutes. Now let's take a step further. I can do batches of batches, using Automatic 11 and say stable diffusion. I can do 50 times 50, so that's what, 2,500? And by the time Bob Ross does one, okay, I can do all my images. Now I can script them, so I can not only do oil paintings, but I can do different styles. I can have different subject matters, different emotions, just by swapping keywords in my script while I'm doing these 2,500 images. So now I don't just have Bob Ross's oil painting. I've got stuff that mimics, Picasso, mimics realistic photography, mimics pencil and ink. And then the final blow is I can do my 2,500 images. I can press a button and leave, go get a pizza, and come back. And, while Bob Ross is sitting there doing this thing the whole time, I've got 2,500 various styles and all that. Bob Ross has one. And it's only going to get, the schism between the two is only going to get greater, because it won't just be photos, it'll be audio tracks. I can sit around with my little beat software, or I can hit AI and say, blah, 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 and scale out from there. Or video's on the horizon. It's coming. It's kind of here in its very alpha stages, but it'll get big. So is it art? Yes, but it's a totally different animal. Now, the claim that artists say they stole, AI companies stole their art. And this, I won't get into the fine details, but let's just, GAN, that company in Germany, went to like all these art places and said, we'd like to train our AI on your art. Can we have access to your data? They said, sure, for some bucks, here you go. And unfortunately, all these people who use these sites, including myself, when you sign up for them, you click through the terms of service and you basically gave it away. So was it legal that GAN, and this is going to be the year of the lawsuits against the AI for the next year or two or three, and they'll kind of all flush out where all this is going. But regardless, stable diffusion is already out in the wild. They can't like pull that back, at least on the AI art side. And a lot of the audio tools and stuff like that, it's already out there. It's like too late to kind of squish it back in a bottle. Plus, do you want to squish it back in a bottle in the countries that will respect law and the countries that don't keep developing it and go crazy and you're behind? So there's that too. But anyway, where was I going? But yeah, AI is just going to get crazy. So the GAN, the company that went and did all this training, was it legal? Yeah, he blew it with the terms of service. This is my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. Was it ethical? Did you know that when you're putting all your art up there that it would be training some AI software that threatens your very livelihood in some instances? And it absolutely will. Like I knew it would just instinctually, but I saw the first indicator, real world indicator of it, little guy made a guy made a little RPG that he's selling just because likes RPGs and stuff, role playing games, pen and pencil stuff like Dungeons and Dragons. And basically, he said, "Oh yeah, all the art in this is generative or whatever the term was." This is about a month ago. So now that everything's generative AI is the terms being used. And what am I going to say? Basically, he did all his own art probably for free, or before he would have had to pay an illustrator. My friend, another friend of mine, did a professional D&D OSR, and if you know what those terms are, great. If you don't worry about it. He just made a game, and he had professional artists in there, and I'm sure he paid top dollar because they're all names and stuff. Now, people that are going to travel down a similar path that he has, unless they're rich and have tons of money to blow, because you're not making a lot of money when you make these games. Even the Goodman Games and the publishers and stuff, I don't think these guys are doing it like as their full-time gig, you know. So if they can cut cost, you know, instead of like producing a game, then they spend, you know, $5,000, $2,000 on artwork to 10, 30, 50, they're going to do it. And the people who normally would provide those services are going to have to adjust, or AI is going to have to become part of their workflow. They're going to have to get better. And this applies to everything too, like coders. AI is going to kick our butts unless you're high, mid to good tier, the low hanging fruit. And a lot of things AI is just going to gobble up. That includes art, code, music generation, just all sorts of stuff. And you know, Bing AI integration with OpenChat with GPT or Chat GPT and Open. I saw a demo of that, and it's going to be amazing. I mean, you can already use a web extension that will allow you Chat GPT to do web searches, but this is more integrated. It's cool. You know, Microsoft's trying to force everyone to use their browser again. That might work. I doubt it'll work forever. It'll work for a while. And Google and other companies really ought to play catch up because it's pretty cool, man. So anyway, AI is art. They did get the training legally, and the genie's out of the bottle. It's art, but it's not the same. You know, it's a different branch of things, and it's totally different. How it's going to affect art and other areas of society is just going to, it's all going to start working out. I'd say the dawn of real world AI, like it's been around for decades. I think it's the original paper that kicked most of this stuff off. Somebody was telling me, I immediately forgot all the details, written in the 70s. So they've been messing with this stuff through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. But I think when it really kicked off was the third quarter of 2022. And now it's just genie out of the bottle. It's going to be crazy to see what's going on. And a lot of people are fearful. Like I know some Christian people that are like, oh man, I don't want to, this AI stuff's just going to be evil. Absolutely. But it's a tool. You know, it's like, is money evil? No. Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil. So it's money itself isn't the problem. It's what evil humanity does with it. And AI will just give another tool like nuclear weapons and surveillance cameras and all that, where humanity can abuse each other, and it absolutely will be used for that. But at the same time, it is a tool that can be used for a lot of good purposes, and it will, like medical diagnosis and stuff like that. At least the potential for all that's there, for helping people find stuff that they need, find information that they need to help idiots like me who can barely draw stick figures generate some pretty cool art, although I'm sure that frustrates a lot of artists. But it actually, in a way, it's kind of cool for me. And again, I try not to use like artist names when I'm generating art, because I do think that's, especially if they're like living, working artists, you know, somebody who died in the 70s, you want to do something that's the same style as them. But somebody, you know, anyway, I'm tired, so my mind's a little foggy. I lose my place and I can't get back there. I've noticed that a lot lately. I just think that's because I'm not getting enough sleep. So anyway, yeah, AI is just going to do some amazing stuff. It's going to be just crazy, and we're going to see a lot of it this year. Um, you know, somebody that was talking to me about AI robots, the Musk bots, whatever they're called, and other people. You have General Dynamic or Boston Dynamics with their little walking dogs and stuff. My boss made a good point where he said basically, a lot of that's, they're very expensive units. They probably are putting on the dog and pony show where people like Musk are going for units that are going to be competitive to having a worker person there. And somebody asked me, that's, made the comment, that's still 5 or 6 years out. It's like, I don't think so. I mean, if there's something's networked, it has the AI to interact with you just through a network. It's just pairing that with the motor skills and the training that it needs to perform whatever duties it does, and they'll lock that down. So I think this stuff, all things remaining equal, which they rarely ever do, but if all things remain equal, this stuff's going to come on fast and hard, and this is going to be the year you're going to see a lot of it. Now, there could be disruptions where the Taiwan next, Ukraine and Russia, and wars, that could slow the amount of capital that's available to invest in all this stuff. You also have the geopolitical, or not the geopolitical, but the demographic changes where all the boomers are retiring, and the way they invest their money will change. So you're not going to have all these big wealth funds, at least with American money. And overall, the world demographically is getting older. People, that's a whole nother discussion. It's an interesting one. But the gist of it is the economics of having these large pools of cash. Those are going to shrink. So the available global U.S. money to invest on this stuff is shrinking. So it's going to slow down a little bit just from that. And then we have further political and war and all that stuff, disruptions. But all that stuff aside, the trajectory for AI is just boom, and that's disruptive. It's one of those things where, like, they came out with nuclear fusion, supposedly, and I've heard this before. But once in a while, you'll see like a little blip where some university claims to have developed nuclear fusion, got a couple particles going, and then it just black boxes. They're either lying or some national security interest comes in and says, shh. But this latest one got a bit of traction, so maybe it's legit. Maybe the powers that be can't stop it from getting out if they did indeed try to block it. I don't know that they did. So we'll see that. That would change the whole energy equation. Energy is what drives economies. And AI, that could change things. So we've got basically a world that's getting older, the debt's just piling up. If you plug in the numbers with the system remaining equal, government's becoming more dystopic, more totalitarian. It's not a good looking future. And I still think, regardless of things, it's going to trend negative because I'm just Mr. Positive. But you throw in disruptive stuff like nuclear fusion, AI, or fission. I'm tired, I forget. And boom, the game changes, and you can have growth and prosperity and all that, even though all these other factors in the current system would be severely limiting. It'll still be limiting, but maybe less so. So you never know. God might intervene and throw a few curveballs into our horrid state to sustain us and give young people lots of opportunities in the future, which would be nice, right? If we're going to be here in this fallen world, we might as well have opportunities to thrive, as much as we can. And speaking of those dark horses and things that might disrupt everything, we have Russia supposedly massing 500,000 troops, all sorts of tanks and equipment, getting ready to go for another early spring, late winter offensive into Ukraine. ground supposedly. Again, I'm not an expert on the terrain and stuff there, but I guess the ground will be hard because it's frozen, which is better for tracked vehicle and wheel vehicle, just vehicle movement over non-roads and stuff. So it looks like they're going to do another blitzkrieg. They might also try to come in through Belarus too. Moldova is very worried they're going to do something there as well. So it's going to be an interesting month. I mean, I think that's why Western nations all of a sudden are really, you're hearing just constant chatter about tanks going to Ukraine, aircraft. I think it's because they are starting to realize, everybody was euphoric because Ukraine pushed Russia back so much and basically embarrassed them. And you have the Russia files, the people who are just making excuses for Russia all over the place, saying, "Oh, that was a strategic default. They were just falling back and giving up useless territory while their artillery barrage was killing hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. It was all part of the plan." Now, I do think the Ukrainian deaths are being very underreported, and I think Ukraine's in a lot of trouble. But I think that narrative is BS. But what is the narrative is it does look like Russia's going to mass and they're going to push hard to end this thing. And my great fear, as I'm actually in support of Western aid going to Ukraine to try to deter the Russians and get them to withdraw or make a negotiated peace or something like that. But I hope that we're not giving, one person said, we're going to support the Ukrainians to the last Ukrainian. And that's the worst case scenario where the West gets in there and does a lot, but not enough to stop the Russians from their ultimate objective, whatever that might be, the defeat of Ukraine and either occupying most of it or occupying more of it and establishing a government that's not pro-NATO, pro-EU, but pro-Russia, whatever. If all we're doing is just getting a bunch of people killed, then it's the worst case scenario. If we do this and it causes changes in Russia, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. But I do think that the Ukrainians are going to have a big problem. And one of the things, I don't know the situation. It seems like the Ukrainians are really good about using what little resources they had in artillery and stuff to really nip at those Russian supply lines. So maybe the possibility Ukraine could make a giant bear trap where rather than put up stiff resistance, they kind of do a fighting retreat and have the Russians advance and maybe overextend their supply lines, because apparently the Russian army isn't that great with trucks. They're all mostly rail based. Get them to overextend, and then you blow the crap out of their supply lines, and it's back to the war 6 months ago. The Russians came in, they got overextended. The Ukrainians hammered at all the key roads and rail and the bridges going across from Crimea. And the Russians basically ran out of food and ammo and had to pull back and left all sorts of gear and stuff. So that's one thing that they could do. But I think the Russians have learned from their mistakes. They're probably massing all sorts of logistical resources. So it's going to be a big fight. But another problem I fear, and this will be disruptive for the world, is once this is over, if Ukraine loses, then we've got a Russia that's pissed off and antagonistic to the West. And that is going to hasten the demise of the dollar as the reserve currency, because Russia, China, all these countries have peace with us, and they're going to try to work overtime to get rid of us. And once the U.S. loses the reserve currency status, again, this is just me just spitballing as some peon on the internet who knows nothing. But I would say at minimum, and I could get into how I equated all this, but I'm getting tired, so I'm not. I'm going to say at minimum, a third of our lifestyle buying power will go away without us having the dollar as a reserve currency. At minimum, a third. So if you're making $100,000 now, just pick that number because it's easy. That means your buying power will be equivalent to 60,000. But you know what? Inflation's gonna knock that out in X years. I don't know what the equation is, but you're it's like reverse compounding interest where you're losing. Yeah, if you're not gaining, probably a 7% raise a year, you're losing ground anyway. And so most people are going to lose ground. It's just to what end. And you take that and you factor that out by 5-7 years, and it's going to get a little brutal here, unless we have some of these good things that could possibly happen that pour enough wealth into the system, and it's not just all caged up at the top to make a difference. So yeah, that's the situation in February. We're gonna have a big war or a big escalation of the war in Ukraine. AI is really gonna kick off this year. I'm probably gonna move. I got some dark horses floating out there. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. That's all I got. Good night.